look right. Hold on. Yeah, something doesn't look right here. Huh. Oh boy. Alright, let's get this over with. So before rewatching this film, I remembered very little about it. I remembered that it wasn't a very good interpretation of the book. And going into this, I was going to judge it on its own merit. I wasn't going to try to be like, oh, in the book they did this. Oh, because even though I reread the book recently within the last 5 years, I don't remember a lot from the book either. I remember it was better and I remember it was more detailed, but I wasn't going to hold the movie accountable for not getting every single detail in the movie right. Speaking of the books, I have read the first 3, Eragon, Eldest, and Bersinger. I really enjoyed the first one. The third book, Bersinger, is my favorite. I can't read the second book. Like, it is just too boring. I always get to the same point. I get to the middle point where it's Eragon and Saphira in the Elven Forest training and, like, I just get it, like, there's, like, I'm going to exaggerate here, but there's probably, like, 16 chapters in a row where Eragon is doing nothing but sitting in his treehouse while a massive storm blows outside. And it's like, this is not interesting. That's my experience with Eldest. So, in terms of the book, I am familiar with the source material. There's a lot that I didn't remember about it. Like, I would have to reread the book again to really compare how this movie compares to the book. But again, I'm going to judge the movie on its own. So, almost immediately in this film, they reveal who Galbatorix is. Like, they don't, like, show, like, a silhouette or, like, you know, some kind of character cast in shadow doing horrible things. No, they just show this guy, this bald guy, sitting on a throne, and he's just, it's like, okay, I don't care anymore. If you want to reveal this character, there has to be some build-up. So based on the opening, besides the over-the-top narration, it really does seem like we're going to be on track here. It seems like might be a faithful adaptation, you know? Eragon looks like what you might picture the character to look like. You know, Darza looks really cool, the shade. You know, when Saphira is introduced later, she's really good. She looks like, you know, like, she looks like a 3D rendered, like, version of the cover of the book. It's like, okay, this is what the full dragon might look like. So it, like, on the surface, it looks like it would be okay. It's like, okay, I can, like, let's get into this. And then they start talking, and it's bad. It's like, it goes far beyond bad writing and bad direction. It's like this really weird mixture of, like, unnatural exposition mixed with, like, a strange cadence in their speech. They're like, hello, brother, we've fought every morning for the last 7 years. And it's stuff like that. Like, it just doesn't sound natural. It sounds like they're reading off of a script. It sounds like they just looked at their script, like, 4 minutes before the camera started rolling, and they're like, yeah, fighting, yes, we're fighting over breakfast, how whimsical, what? Yeah, it's not natural, nothing about it. It's just way too clunky. Like, it just feels like they have all these words they have to get out in order for the audience to follow what's going on. And they're trying to do it as quickly and as, like, you know, fluidly as possible, but it comes out very clunky and confusing. And the other aspect of this is everything is whimsical. The whole movie is just drenched in whimsy. It's like, 1 second Eragon is mourning the loss of his uncle, and then the next minute he's riding on Saphira and like, oh, wow, I'm sure lucky to have a dragon. Mind you, in the books, Eragon does eventually learn to enjoy, like, you know, Saphira's presence or whatever. But that was taking place over the course of, like, weeks and months. In the movie, it's unclear how much time has actually gone by, but as far as we can tell, it's like the same day. It's like maybe the next morning or something. And it's like, There's no sense of time here. But yes, everything's whimsical. Sparring with your brother over breakfast, for some reason, is whimsical. When Saphira is first hatched, nobody has ever seen a dragon except for Galbatorix and maybe the Shade. Eragon is just far too like, wow, look at you, to this thing he's never seen before that just hatched out of a stone he found in the woods. Yeah, the other thing I noticed right away is that there is a strange abundance of soldiers already in the town. I mean, that's not like necessarily like a bad thing, like a, whoa, that's a red flag. It's more of like a interesting director's choice. It's like, so the soldiers are already here. Because in the book, the town is like a small town. It's just like, kind of off by itself. That's why it's like a very unassuming place for Arya, the elf lady, to send the eggs. It's like, it's very much like in the middle of nowhere. And in the book, the guards only show up months, or like a couple weeks after Eragon leaves on his journey with Braum, because they're looking for Eragon. They're looking for the egg. Like, they learn of Eragon through the townspeople that he was the one who found this weird stone. But it's like they're looking for this egg. They're like, we know it was, like, we can pinpoint it was, like, around here. Let's see if the locals know anything. And then it was only after the town resisted that more reinforcements of soldiers showed up and started attacking the town. But in this movie, there's just soldiers everywhere. It's like you turn the corner and there's just, like, a whole, like, fleet of soldiers just wandering around, being jerks to people in the town. It's like, we have to know the soldiers are evil. If everyone knows the soldiers are jerks, wouldn't that imply that they're unhappy with the rule of Galbatorix? In the book, the point was that the common people like Eragon and the people in his, like, town didn't know the king was evil. They had no stake in it. It was just, here they are living in the land, the king is keeping out the Urkels, that's all we care about. And here it's like everyone's like a freedom fighter. It's like, the king is evil. If we have the power, we should take him down. A side note, the elves in this, they just look like humans. I mean, they don't even have, like, pointed ears or anything. They look like humans. So one thing that I really do like is that when another rider is chosen, the other riders can automatically tell that a rider has been found. It's like they don't necessarily know who or where, but they just have that, like, instant instinct of, like, another rider has been, like, has entered the field. And that's a cool idea. It's like, that not only does Galbatorix know that his dragon egg has been stolen and he wants to get it back before a rider is chosen, but now he knows that a rider has been chosen and that it is starting in motion of something that could become unstoppable. And it also gives the viewer a little bit of insight into Braum's true nature. They don't handle that reveal well later, where Eragon just randomly decides, this guy knows way too much about dragons, takes off his glove and is like, ha, you're a dragon rider. It's like, but whatever. In theory, this scene where he, like, Eragon becomes the dragon rider and Braum reacts is like, that's a nice little hint to the audience who haven't read the books and don't know anything, that maybe that this old guy in the village has a little more to his character and will become relevant. However, that being said, unfortunately we have to see more of Galbatorix, and the more you see of him, the less intimidating he is. The other unfortunate thing is that throughout the course of this first part of the movie, they introduce this legendary prophecy that this boy is the one to fulfill the prophecy. And it's like, what? Why? We don't need this. We did not need a prophecy that had to be fulfilled. Of, oh, somebody will rise and slay the king. The other unfortunate thing that is introduced into this movie is the idea of Saphira learning to fly, flying up into the sky, being struck by lightning, and immediately being full grown. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, here's a character that we could have had weeks or months to get to know and how their relationship grows and how they change. No, now she's just fully grown and she can just exposition the crap out of you every single time the camera cuts to her. Who needs bonds and character development? We've got a plot to jumpstart here. Come on. We got a prophecy to fulfill. Continuing on with this, we'll call it a story, Eragon needs to learn more information about dragons, because staring at his dragon whimsically is not enough for him. So he goes into Brom's house and just starts looking through his things. Instead of, finding Brom and asking him, he just starts going through his books, because that's great. And then Brom just, pops out and jump scares Eragon for no real reason. And it's just a really completely pointless scene. It's just to remind us that Brom knows something about dragons. As I said before, the designs in this movie are actually pretty good. The Razak, for example, they do legitimately look terrifying. Like they're these creepy bug monsters. For what they are, they're pretty terrifying. It's like, they're just really strong, really fast, and they're just going around and basically attacking everyone in town until they get what they want to know. But, unfortunately, story purposes say, you're bad at your jobs, because Eragon has to escape somehow, and you guys have to just be minor antagonists. And at one point, they kill Eragon's uncle, and then they're just hey, should we wait for him to come back and get him when he comes back? Nah, he isn't here. Let's just go home. Yeah, okay. Discovering that his uncle is dead, Eragon is understandably very upset by this. And then Brom shows up, and, he was like, come on, we gotta go. And, I guess thinking about it, it makes sense, but in the film, there was really no real danger, and as far as we know, the people who, the Razak never come back. It's it really feels unnecessary. Brom is just I'm gonna burn your house down, and you're not even gonna be able to pick up any of your supplies. Let's just go. And it's this seems more like a kidnapping than a rescue. Thank God, Eragon and Brom trained in sword fighting for one whole afternoon. Eragon practically becomes a quote-unquote master swords fighter by the end of this film. And as far as we know, there was only one day they actually trained in terms of on-screen combat. And it was Eragon's cocky, and Brom's you're too cocky. And then Eragon's I've learned from my mistakes, and Brom's you learn quickly. And it's okay, is that supposed to symbolize weeks of training, or is this just a one-time thing that Eragon's naturally gifted at to fulfill the prophecy? And then, continuing in this tradition of no training necessary, Eragon just masters magic, instantly. He hears Brom mumble something under his breath to start the fire, and he just he's what is that? And Brom's oh, it's nothing, gonna start the fire with rocks. And then in the town, he just randomly is I'm gonna use magic. And then he passes out because it was too powerful for him. And then he never has a problem with it ever again. He just can, Brom teaches him, random words in, Elvish, 3 or 4 magic words. And he can just do it now perfectly. Who needs, practice and, trial and error? Nope, he's a master at it. Oh, yeah, and then Brom dies. So in this story, Brom taught Eragon how to sword fight for one day. He taught him a small handful of magic words, and then he dies. Not much of a teacher this time around, I see. So the plot of this movie, if you can even call it that, is for Eragon to get to the Varden, which are basically the freedom fighters that are trying to take down the king. To get into this magic, place where all the Varden are, all you have to do is jump into the waterfall and swim 5 feet, and you're in. That's the worst secret entrance ever. Literally anyone who falls into the river could find the Varden secret entrance by accident. Oh yeah, and Saphira can breathe fire now. Just completely random. But just in time for the climax. How convenient. Who needs character development or learning how to use your fire when, no, you know what, it's the final battle. You can just use fire now. Speaking of the final battle, and Eragon, again, he's just really good at fighting now. And it doesn't feel earned. In the movie, if you just watch it, he barely trains for more than like a day on each thing. He trains for a day using a sword with Braum. He trained for like another couple of days maybe for magic. And then he trained like once that we saw, or him flying on Saphira's back. So over the course of the movie, we have maybe at most a week of training. And not even training in the same thing for a full week. Training in different things. The implication being that he was training throughout his whole journey. But the problem here is, where in the book, it was like you could have a reliable time frame of it took him almost like a year, maybe even more than a year, to get from his home all the way to where the Varden are. And throughout that entire time, he was constantly training every single day, every single night, and with a lot of extra battles thrown in throughout that weren't part of his training and that he had to deal with and adapt to. In this, it is unclear how long it actually took him to get there, but it seems less like a traveling across a continent journey and more like a, alright, we're gonna walk to the next town over journey, and it's like, we'll be there in a couple of days. And if it's like, even if you've implied that he's training every single day, you just don't have enough time to turn this, like, farm boy who's never wielded a sword before into the sword wielder you see in the final climax. Like, he easily beats Darza in this final conflict. Yes, Saphira gets injured, but it's like, there is no stakes. You know going in that Eragon's going to win, because he's too good. You see him flying around, doing all these crazy maneuvers and firing off magic, and he just doesn't even break a sweat. Putting him in this situation, it doesn't really make him look strong or gifted. It just makes everyone else look incompetent and pathetic. Like, Eragon doesn't look like he's grown at all, and he hasn't learned anything. He's still the same character, just now instead of hunting in the woods, now he's like flying around on a dragon. It's like, just because you've changed his environment doesn't mean his character has changed. He's still the same wide-eyed, whimsical kid that we saw at the beginning of the film. He hasn't evolved. In conclusion, this movie is just far too clunky and whimsical. The character designs are really great, but it lacks the characters that go with it. It's just a poor adaptation, as I knew going in, but I can't even say that it did a good job on its own. Like, if you were just walking in, you've never read the book, you had no idea about any of this, you would be both confused and bored. And that's just not something you'd want for your film. I gotta say, though, this isn't as bad as I remember, but it's still pretty bad. So I thought that movie was going to be a lot worse than it was. In the end, it wasn't bad. It had some good character design, and other than that, that's about all I got to say. The next film I'll be reviewing is Balto. I had talked about this in my previous movie review segment, and I said talk about this very loosely. I don't remember anything from that movie. I know that there was a wolf dog. I know that he was like a sled dog. He got the medicine to the children. And that's about all I got. I remember I really liked it, but if you asked me what about it I really liked, I probably couldn't tell you, because I haven't seen it in probably like 10 years. So, next month I'll be reviewing Balto. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you liked it, and until next time, take care.